Okay, says we're live, so hello, welcome. This is Behind the Scenes of AV Rant, episode number 704. This is the live stream as Tom and I talk to one another on Skype, so there could be glitches. We're already starting with some glitches that'll explain at the beginning of the podcast. So, yeah, you've been warned. This is just the live feed, and there is a completed show that goes up later in the week. Yeah. That should be all the warnings. Let's see if I... Whoa, what does that do? Does that do that live? That does do that live. All right, that's going to be a bit... weird. All right, well, we'll figure it out. Da-da-da. It's going to be a fun one. Okay. Yeah, Tom, can you say something out loud and see if our mic is still working here?
Something out loud.
Yeah, it looks like it shows up in my OBS anyway, so I'm gonna assume that's good enough. Right. Well, fingers crossed, folks. Let's hope this somewhat works. Tom can start when he pleases.
Get back to this. Move it all the way to the right, so I won't get confused with other things. Let's see what time we were at. Welcome to another edition of AV Rant. I'm Tom Andry, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AV Rant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered.
Didn't get any water. I didn't get any water after all those pauses and
after me postponing the start of this podcast because foolishly once again I did the most recent Windows update, the big update thing. Anybody who's on Windows knows.
Oh, the thing that broke like Chrome.
Yeah, pretty much, because they like changed Edge over to a Chromium based web browser and made a whole bunch of other changes. So foolishly, I went ahead and did that update, which of course broke parts of OBS and my Microsoft webcam, as it always seems to do. So if you come over and watch the YouTube video of episode 704 here, Tom's video is messed up. It's a small Skype window, which is better than nothing at all, but it doesn't look correct. And so, that's how things go. One day I'll learn not to do the Tuesday patch update before we begin the podcast, but not this week, so this is what we get. There we go.
Well, yes. This is AV Rant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. To get your questions answered, all you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. You can go to avrant.com, find the podcast there. You can post comments for now until I get irritated with it and turn it back off again. Facebook.com/avrant. Podcast, is that right?
Indeed. The only one that does not have a podcast
YouTube.
on the end is YouTube. Yeah.
YouTube.com/AVRant. Rob directly is Rob@AVRant.com. His Twitter's at First Reflect. I'm Tom at AVRant.com. My Twitter's at AVRant_Tom. I shaved. I said I wasn't going to, but I shaved. I shaved my Corona beard off.
I didn't even comment on it because I didn't really even notice, because I've seen Tom so many times and I'm so used to him clean shaven that it didn't register till you said it. So I'm a bad friend, but then again, I was dealing with stupid Windows, so that's my excuse.
Feel free to go to Facebook, Rob, and you can see I shaved it off in stages. So I have the beard and I have the Van Dyke or the goatee. I don't know what they call it. There's a specific name.
Yeah, when you have the mustache and the goatee together, that's a Van Dyke, and then the goatee is just the chin part.
And I shaved off the goatee part, except for a little soul patch and a mustache.
You had a mustache and did you taper it down so you looked pirate-ish?
It is very To Catch a Predator. I will be honest with you. It is very bad. It is not good. I will maybe share those pictures someday on this podcast, but it will not be today. So if you're not one of my Facebook friends, first of all, don't Facebook friend me because I'm not going to accept. I almost never do. No offense, I just don't. But it's quite horrible. It's quite horrible. So and then I shaved the rest of it completely off. My wife just screamed no as I came out of the bathroom to take pictures. Have my son take pictures of me. She just looked at me and went no.
Each stage progressively no until no facial hair. Then we're all right again.
She doesn't mind the goatee or the Van Dyke.
Okay.
She doesn't mind the beard. It's just really gray and it's patchy gray and it's not very thick. But I didn't love it. and it made me look old. It made me feel old. So I was just, I didn't mind not having to shave very often. That was great. I might just grow it back for that alone. But
and you never lotioned. That's on you for never lotioning.
Why do I need a lotion?
So that it doesn't itch so badly.
It didn't itch.
Yours didn't itch? Oh,
no.
Mine itches like crazy if I.
Well, after a certain point, it stopped itching. Okay. But then, but yeah, having it inside the mask in Florida with 90% humidity and stuff is it's brutal. And I'm still wearing a mask religiously. I'm making my family wear a mask religiously, even though I live in Florida, where I'm very happy I live in a fairly progressive city, because there are parts of the state where you can straight up get shot for that. It feels like,
man.
So I'm glad that that's not the case, but tensions are running high in this country. I will tell you that much, Rob.
That is in the news. That has made its way in the media across the border, that there are tensions running high.
To add to all that, as many of you know, I've had bathroom issues as of today.
Clarify, as in your actual washroom, not that you are having bathroom issues.
Right.
For anyone tuning in for the first time.
If you guys want to report on that, you'll have to go see my 50 Shades of Grey fanfic if you want to know anything more about that. But no, my actual bathroom is in the remodel stages. Remodelers have been in and out of the house, which means that not only am I wearing a mask when I leave the house, I now get to wear a mask when I'm in my house.
Right.
Everybody's wearing a mask all the time.
Good times.
So it's awful. But so that's one of the reasons why I shaved. But they're putting in tile tomorrow. And the next day,
towards finishing stages then at that point.
By Saturday night, that bathroom will be fixed.
Woo! And the kitchen, is that yet to come or already done?
Yeah, they just took out all the cabinets that were affected, and because they were all custom, they have to get a custom cabinet maker to remake them. So now they have left, and they will not be returning until they are made, and then they will install everything. So it'll only be another couple of weeks, but we are light at the end of the rainbow here.
All right.
So very good.
Okay.
But, and this actually affects the podcast, because I have to be very careful. I had dental surgery on Friday.
Yes.
It was scheduled for a long time ago, and I kept pushing it until they were like, listen, you have to come in. So I will spare you the gory details, but it involved getting to the bone above some of my teeth and scraping it and stuff, and then jackhammering, it felt like. I'm not really sure. And then they did some bone grafting sort of things, because I guess I had some bone loss. So now I have like 5 stitches in the upper part of my mouth that are in there still, and it means that if I smile too hard, it hurts a lot. So I am. You may see me grab my face if you're watching the thing. That's just me literally holding my mouth in place because it hurts. It didn't hurt that bad. I mean, they gave me like opiates, right? And then I got a call from my insurance company, like, they sent you opiates. I'm like, I'm not going to take them.
You didn't have to tough it out that badly. You told me it was worse than you were hoping / expecting, but I didn't know it was that bad. Jeez, man.
It was fairly invasive. It was a little bit more invasive than I expected it to be. But I have a very high pain tolerance, so that night, after I contacted you, I was like, that was when the meds were wearing off, and I was really sore. But by the next day, I felt fine. I took literally 1 pill. Then now I'm sitting here with this bottle of opiates, and I'm like, I guess I'm gonna flush them down the toilet. I really don't know what to do with them. I feel like I don't
think you're supposed to do that. You're supposed to take it to a pharmacy and return it properly. That's at least here. That's what we do here.
Well, I don't know that that's the case. I'll find out. But I remember there being like some sort of place that you can donate them. Like people who can't pay for pills, you donate these pills. I don't know if you can do that now with the Rona and all that, but whatever. I will try to do something with them that doesn't involve my kids getting into them, which is what I'm really afraid of.
Indeed.
More than anything, since they're constantly here. I mean, they're literally in the other room, not asleep, because I almost forgot about this podcast. I have no idea what day it is. If you had told me it was Thursday, I'd been like, yeah, that feels right.
Could be.
That feels perfect. All right. So we already did the call sign and everything. So let's start off by thanking our listeners of the week. start with we want to thank our 121 patrons over at patreon.com. Patreon's a service that you subscribe to, become a supporting listener, supporting contributor, a contributing listener, something, and that involves one or more of those three words. And every month they will take some money from you and give it to us. So we want to thank our 121 patrons over at patreon.com.
Indeed, patreon.com/AVRant Podcast. If you'd like to sign up, think of it as a voluntary subscription if you like. Thanks so much to our 121 patrons over there.
Holding steady at 121.
I'm more than happy with that.
I'm
very happy with that. Still expecting it to drop down, so holding steady, fine by me.
Yeah. We also want to thank those people who can support the podcast in other ways. If you can think of some way to support the podcast, just tell us what you did. Then as if we deem it worthy, which we almost always do, then we will. I can't imagine what somebody would say. I told my dog about you. Okay, that doesn't count, dude. But thanks. I named my dog AV Rant. I named my dog Tom and Rob. That
definitely.
I would mention. God, just can't. I can't smile. It's really hard. So we want to thank Gurinder. He sent Rob an Amazon gift card.
Yeah, Gurinder, thank you very much. We did a little emailing back and forth, but that was unexpectedly generous, so always appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. And Victor, who says he gives us a shout out at every electronics store whenever he buys something, even though some of them have no idea who we are. Let's be honest. None of them have any idea who they are.
SVS knows who we are. Accessories for Less knows who we are.
That's true. That's true. I was assuming he was talking about Best Buy and
yes,
something like that.
If it is that, but no, Victor, we appreciate the support. Thank you. Never hurts to drop our name. So yeah, that's great.
Thank you. Neil and David both let us know that they talked us up to SVS. So thank you, Neil and David.
Yes, Neil and David, thank you both very much. Yeah, SVS does know about us, so that one worked.
Yeah, that one we know. That one's well known. I will say these speakers, for being brand new, have never been. I think I can't keep them not dusty because they're right on the other side of that door. So we're hopefully going to get that worked out. But we also got some notes of gratitude from people who are thanking us for the podcast, at least keeping it going during all of this. So we want to thank Greg, Kevin, Dan, and Carl for that.
For sure. I'll repeat the names: Greg, Kevin, Dan, and Carl. And yeah, folks should drop a line to Tom. Give him some thanks for toughing it out, coming here when he's got bones grafted inside his face. My goodness, man.
I'm not supposed to use a straw. I'm like, what? They're like, yeah, because
usually it's the other way around, you know.
Yeah, the pressure of having it come in, it could wash up underneath my gums where they did stuff and wash away the bone graft. I'm like, well, I don't use straws anyway. So I mean, I the only time I ever use straws is when I went out to restaurants. Not doing that. So
not right now.
Yeah. Oh yeah, they opened up a lot of the businesses around here, and 3 of them got shut down already because of outbreaks, and at least 2 rec centers, which are hosting summer camps for kids, were shut down for a couple of days or week or whatever.
Well,
because of outbreaks. So.
For some insane reason, trying to get the NHL season to still be completed. I'm like, it's at the earliest it would start in August. I'm like, oh yes, that's what everyone wants. Hockey in August. Like, even we Canadians are like, no, it's fine. The 2020 season got canceled. That's what happened.
You guys have had seasons canceled for strikes, though, haven't you?
Shortened. Yeah, shortened.
Okay.
But so, yeah, I mean, they really want to award the Stanley Cup, but everybody's like, no, don't. And Vancouver, where I live, or just outside of it, we're one of the cities that's vying to be like one of the 2 host cities on either end of the continent that will host all the teams during the playoffs. We're vying. I'm like, no, let's maybe not do that.
Right. I mean, okay, so I know that some, like in South Korea,
yes,
they never stopped playing baseball.
That's
I don't
right.
think. Which, honestly, no, there's like 3 people who are standing next to each other at any given time at that stupid game. So I really don't see that that's really. I mean, you wear a mask and you're pretty much fine as far as I'm concerned. Hockey is a little bit more, you know.
Well, and like
sweat flying in the air. And
all the players have to be like sequestered away from their families. They want to do a 24-team playoff. I'm like, all of this is dumb. Let's not do any of it. But whatever, they're still trying. But this is not about hockey. We're about home theater. Let's do that.
Sometimes hockey makes really great home theater. I will say, though, if anybody has suggestions, I am... because we are going through masks like crazy. We're like breaking them as we're using them constantly. And I'm really looking for a mask that's not like, you know, a t-shirt material, whatever. I'm also not, I really don't care about having, charcoal filters that I have to buy to put in and stuff. I just want like a nice polyester moisture wicking mask that doesn't do the ear thing. The ear loops drive me nuts, and especially when trying to exercise and stuff, it doesn't really work that well. So if anybody has any suggestions or ones that they've tried and liked and can get shipped in a reasonable time, hit me up at tom@avrant.com. I'd be very interested. I'm especially interested in anything that ties or velcros. I am super not interested in the stuff that goes over your ear because it's just I have not been very happy with those. Okay. In the news, Sony has revealed the design of the PS5 logo.
No, not logo. Console.
I'm sorry, console. Let me just say,
actual console.
I saw like people turning that console's like design into figure, people, like cartoon characters. Yeah. Like before I even saw the console itself. I mean, it hit and like absolutely went like wildfire across, all the various places that I visit. But and let me just say that I really appreciate Sony just sticking with the whole PS add a number to it.
Yes, it works for them.
I just feel like this is a company where I don't necessarily always love Sony, but this is a naming convention I can get behind. Not where everything ends up being weird like with Xbox. But so they revealed the design of the PS5 console, but did not reveal price or launch date yet. And a small surprise, there are two PS5 console versions, one with an Ultra HD Blu-ray disc drive and a digital edition with no disc drive. It's a two-tone design, just like the DualSense controller that was revealed earlier. Standing vertically, it gives the appearance of a slight V shape with the outer white edges tapered in and the black section down the middle. Quite a few people have commented online that it reminds them of a fancy-looking Wi-Fi router, but then again, anything standing up like that reminds people of a Wi-Fi router because that's the only piece of equipment that I own that stands up like that, on the regular. It's a sleek-looking console. The vents are running along the entire length and depth on both sides of the center black section, indicating lots of air circulation is needed in order to keep the internal components cool, and physically it's big. Estimating its size based on the disk drive slot and USB ports, it's bigger than the day one edition of Xbox One, bigger than the first generation of the PS3. In fact, it's one of the largest consoles ever. It can lay horizontally, but it might be a snug fit width-wise in many entertainment consoles. So, what I really want to see here is a tower, like a normal tower,
PC?
Computer tower. Yeah.
I don't have that in the comparison image I found.
No, but you could see it's a good quarter taller, like 25% taller than the 360, the Xbox 360.
Yeah.
And most of us kind of have a good idea of how big that is.
Yeah.
So
it's actually a little reminiscent of the original Xbox 360, the white one with the tapered sides. Yeah. It's slightly reminiscent of that shape when they're both standing up.
I think it looks nice. I honestly, I can kind of. Well, I hate the idea of having all of my media be digital, meaning that downloading games and stuff like that. I think for a lot of people, that's just how they operate. And if they can save money and get a cheaper version that doesn't have a disc drive in it, I feel like that's not a bad offering. I feel like that's something that's probably...
the word aspire got thrown out again, which was the infamous word that was used with the PlayStation 3 when the price of $599 came out. They said people will it's an aspirational price. People will aspire to own a PS3, and they went and dropped the word aspire again. So my prediction, unlike everybody else, is that the digital only edition will cost $499 and the one with the disc drive will cost $599. That's my prediction. I think it's going to be higher than everyone is hoping for.
So Sony also revealed several official accessories, including a media remote, a wireless headset, a controller charging dock, and a dual lens HD camera. I just want it to not be Bluetooth. Can we have it not be Bluetooth this time?
None of their other cameras have been. They've always been wired before, but...
No, I'm talking about just like the controllers and...
Oh, the controllers.
Everything else.
I'm sure the controllers are still Bluetooth.
Yeah.
That's what I would expect.
All right. Well, I guess this is exciting for somebody. Right now, people are kind of, are going to be getting very desperate for new things to do. I know that you cannot shake a stick. I mean, you can't find a Switch anywhere.
That's right.
It's impossible to find. And knowing Nintendo, they're like, oh, good, we don't have to make any more. We already sold them all. Because they do that all the time. I'm like, dude, demand is there and you're not meeting it. And they're like, yeah, it's okay. We're good. What? What's wrong with you people? All right, some comments here. Damien, or I guess we should refer to him as Daz now, I guess, because of reasons. Made an unboxing YouTube video for his Ascend Acoustics SE series speakers since he couldn't find one when he was looking for one. So if you want to see an unboxing video of Ascend Acoustics SE series speakers, we now have a link for you at avrant.com.
Yeah, he put up a rather fun video. He said a friend of his actually edited it. He put in some, cutaways and jokes and stuff like that. So wanted to give a shout out. Damien's written to us plenty of times. I consider him a friend online. So yeah, we'll have the link for his video at avrant.com and in the show notes. Links below.
So Lee, this is not Overstreet, but another Lee, bought one of the new Sonos Move outdoor wireless speakers, and he just wanted to offer his impressions. He is super impressed with it. He says it works flawlessly, and switching from Wi-Fi to Bluetooth and back is fast and smooth. Voice commands work. The Sonos app is easy to use, and he was surprised at how well its auto-tuning feature worked. He says it was always a proponent. He was always a proponent for having wired outdoor speakers, and he knows several people who have been asking about outdoor speakers lately. The Sonos Move has changed his opinion, and he would highly recommend it to anyone. I often recommend wireless outdoor speakers. So, welcome. You're right. Welcome. I guess. You're welcome.
Yeah. No. It's a nice looking speaker. It's rather reasonably priced as far as Sonos components goes. So yeah, that's the first listener sort of review impressions that we've received back. So good to hear that someone who listens to this podcast has been impressed with it, thinks it has good sound quality and good features and works smoothly.
Ooh, remind me to talk about the Xbox One Atmos thingy.
Okay,
because I did a little bit of formal testing, but very little over this time. I mean, I can't hardly get back into this room because there's always workers going back and forth, and they have to. So only at night do we get to move the couch back and kind of be in here, and then everybody's around, so it's hard to do. Carl heard Alvin's question about Dolby Atmos for Windows and whether there's an easy way to switch the audio output in Windows, since setting it to Atmos doesn't allow for upmixing by a receiver. Rob mentioned that individual apps could potentially use different audio drivers to bypass the Windows mixer, but Carl wanted to point out that most media playback apps now have the option for bitstream output. So he leaves his window audio set to stereo output. That way he can always apply upmixing, but he makes sure to use bitstream output for any media app so that Dolby Digital Plus or Atmos gets played for those sources. Good. There's the thing.
Sure. Yeah, good. So not super different from what I was suggesting, but yes, as long as your app does have a bitstream setting, then you don't need a separate audio driver for that. It'll just bitstream out, bypassing the Windows mixer. And, since we just talked about Dolby Atmos for Windows, why don't we throw in your Xbox audio comment? What's going there? Because it's somewhat related.
Yeah, so I think I was watching Supernatural because I've got one son who's like on season 3, and I'm on season 15. So I'm kind of flicking back and forth. So it was like season 3, and I was going between the original, whatever it said, audio, and then the 5.1 audio. Okay, so it was defaulting to the 5.1 audio, and I was getting 5.1. The surround back speakers were not playing.
Okay,
for sure. The overhead speakers I didn't get a chance to check because I figured if the surround backs weren't playing, the overheads weren't playing either.
Any idea what it said on the front of your AV receiver while that was up? It still says Atmos. Okay.
Atmos. So I double checked all the settings with an Xbox One. So I went to the Dolby Atmos thing, made sure it said upmixing was enabled, blah, blah, blah.
That's the Dolby Access app within the Xbox One.
Yeah. So the app's a pain. It's like every time you do anything with it, it's like, oh, you have to buy before you do it. But what about if I go to this tab over here? Oh, you don't have to buy for this.
That's right.
It's kind of a pain. But so then I changed it from the 5.1 to the original.
Okay. This is in Netflix. You set it to the original audio while the video was playing.
That's right. And then I got stereo.
Okay. And the front of your AV receiver still said Atmos?
Atmos, yeah.
Joy.
So working as advertised, in case any of you were wondering.
That upmixing is really kicking it inside.
I honestly believe I am getting Atmos from Disney Plus, though, because we watched the new Maleficent movie, and it was definitely above me. Okay. I mean, I did not check it. I did not put my ear up to it to make sure. It could just be, phase and all that other stuff, and I will try to double check it one of these days. But it was very encompassing movie. So that one was good. Yeah, that's my continuing update on that. I will continue to do that.
One day they'll sort it out. I have no confidence they ever will.
Never happen. It will never happen. Christian wanted to advocate for OSMC. It's the Ostrich Simian Marine Corps.
Must be.
Ostrich riding simians are riding the ostriches. I like it. Anyways, Open Source Media Center and their own Vero 4K Plus hardware. It's based on the Linux version of Kodi, but all developments and apps are open source and free. For what it's worth, Christian prefers it to Plex on NVIDIA Shield, and he thought other listeners might like to check it out. Are you going to check it out, Rob?
I am not. I don't have a ton of interest in digging back into Kodi. I know people use it, and it would probably be helpful if I did, but I don't have the time to dig into all the things that Kodi can do. What Kodi can do is pretty amazing as a program. If you're willing to dig into the add-ons and everything that you can program in that software, it is tremendously powerful. But one thing that Plex makes very, very easy is having a server running at home and being able to access all of your Plex server content remotely, out on your phone or via any other internet connection over at somebody else's house. That's very easy in Plex. You can do a similar thing in Kodi, but you sort of have to manually set it up to do it using other plugins and that. So it's not quite as easy as just putting a check mark besides remote access. So in any case, if people want to check it out, by all means, this is something that can run on a Raspberry Pi. You don't have to use their own Vero hardware. So it's free. It can be powerful. So perhaps check out OSMC.
Neil from the UK. From the first time Neil wrote us about his attic home theater, he asked if you should get a second SVS SB2000 or upgrade to bigger ported model for the second sub. And we told him to get a second SB2000, a sealed box 2000. Mm-hmm. Okay, in his little bitty room. It's above an attic or something, above a garage. It's an A-frame. It's tiny. It's got 2 seats. The last time we discussed this setup, Rob ended by saying, I bet he ends up buying 2 PC 2000 Pros. And, of course, Rob was right. Surprising nobody. First up, Neil wants to give huge props to Richer Sounds, which is an official reseller for SVS in the UK, and to SVS's customer service. Both provided fast, friendly, helpful service throughout the entire purchase and afterwards, so he has nothing but good things to say about both companies. Next, he's super happy with the dual PC 2000 Pros. He ended up with their volume set way below halfway, but he mostly wanted more extension, not output. They revealed many new rattles, as they tend to do, and some sticky, transparent silicone pads helped a great deal on his doors and radiators. He had insulation wedged into the corners, basically flush against the subwoofer supports. He was getting a flapping sound they never fully identified, but he contacted SVS, and they helped him out by sending port plugs via Richer Sounds. Between them, the app, and all the settings, it's tinkerer's heaven, and now he has the bass he was hoping for, and so the peace of mind was all worth it.
He ended up with sealed subs after all of that is the long and short of that. And the flapping was probably literally the insulation flapping. I bet that's what it was.
There's actually air coming through that port. It's not just there for looks. So something was flapping over there. We said all along that cylinders firing downward would be no different than firing forward, and it's just something that I think he was concerned about, right? Was it him? And it felt like it was somebody else too. But he always had trouble believing it. Now he has first-hand experience, and we were right. Lastly, I know we're right. Thank you. You think we'd do this for the giggles? We like being right all the time. It's fun. That's why people come here, hear us being right. Joking, man. Lastly, he wanted to share the super easy bass traps he made by cutting some Rockwell insulation, putting in cotton pillowcases, and putting those in some IKEA shelves. So, that's the thing. I mean, they make those. It's
a good idea. The pillowcase thing, anyway.
The box things, right? Yeah. There's they're open on the front and the back.
That's right.
And then you just shove it full of insulation.
Yeah, and I like the pillowcase idea because, as he was pointing out, it allows you to choose whatever color you want. You can get patterns, you can get pictures, whatever it is, and it's already a rectangular type shape, no sewing to be done, and you put some insulation into a pillowcase, and voila, you've created it. So I like that idea. That's handy.
I like it. All right, let's get to the questions here. Infinite Gary, during the Audioholics video with Phil Jones with the new 2020 Denon receivers, Gina asked about the height center height position that the 6700H can use with Auro 3D and TTS X Pro. Gene wanted to make sure it actually is a separate channel and not just a second center channel output being run in parallel, or duped, as you might say. Gene said that having one center above the screen and another below the screen running in mono together would create massive acoustic interference.
That was the quote. Those were the words.
I believe that he said that. I can't believe he said it, because I know that they've published reviews on that website. One of them was written by a very good friend of mine, where they put one above and one below, and it worked just fine. So massive acoustic interference seems a bit dramatic.
I mean, he said it pretty like flatly, not a lot of emphasis on it, but in any case, those were the exact words.
But in the past, Gary has tried setups with doubled up speakers. He never noticed any obvious problems or anomalies in the sound. I mean, that works too. So what are the massive interference problems that Gene was referring to? Comb filtering, basically you've got two speakers that are coming at you from different angles, and then those sound waves come together, and then some of them do some canceling, and some of them do some adding and stuff like that. That's what he's referring to. Yep. And yes, it's a measurable,
it is. It looks very ugly on a graph.
Subjectively noticeable thing, possibly, but most of the time, it just isn't. Yeah.
Comb filtering is something our brain is actually quite good at filtering out in terms of perception, but where you are able to actually perceive and notice comb filtering is if you are moving your head and sort of in a swaying, like not super fast, but if you're kind of just rocking your head back and forth or forward and back at a pretty steady pace, that's where you can hear the sound kind of make like wop, 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 wop sounds. It's like little beats in there, and that's, you can see it. It looks like spikes of a comb, which is why they call it comb filtering in the graph.
I will say that I am not a proponent for having a center channel above and below a...
I wouldn't have that. Both of them.
I mean, I don't think it's a good idea, but to suggest that it is going to make massive, I mean, I just feel like that's disingenuous.
The bigger reason to me to not do the one center above and one center below your screen is because it's faulty reasoning that doing that will make it sound like it's coming from dead center, because we don't stereo image top to bottom very well at all unless we're lying horizontally on our side.
If you're lying down while you're watching it, then it does.
Right.
It does. It should do that, but,
I mean, in fact, when we talk about how normally we have a center speaker either above or below our screen, and our brain very easily tends to just lock the sound coming from that speaker to what we see on the screen, particularly people's lips moving, and the sound is coming from above or below, but our brain says, no, it's coming from their mouth, when our eye-ear system works together. When you have one speaker above and one speaker below, you tend, even with the image, to have that sound locked to the bottom one or the top one, because there is some of that interference going on, and our brain does a whole bunch of things in the background subconsciously that makes it kind of go, well, it's either coming from that one or that one. It tends to be what happens, much like sitting far off to the left or right kills your phantom center image. And it tends to just lock to the closest speaker. So I'm not a fan of doing the center above and below, but say massive acoustic interference. Well, it is measurable. It'll show up in a graph. So,
well, that's the thing. If you're looking at the graph, you go, oh my God, look at this. But I think subjectively, it's rarely an issue.
If you're holding pretty still, you're not going to notice that. Yeah.
So what was the answer?
We say what was the massive acoustic interference he's referring to?
I mean, what was the answer of whether or not it was a?
It's not. It's a center height channel that's being derived, much like your front height channels are not playing the exact same thing as your front left right main speakers. Yeah.
I've seen some. I saw on Facebook or something. I think it was SVS posted a picture of a room that was
all tricked out for Auro.
Yeah, but it was totally Auro, and nobody in the comments were like, "Oh, I'm just thinking about getting Atmos." I'm like, "That's not Atmos, it's Auro." But whatever. When the Marantz manual describes the difference between Odyssey Flat and Odyssey Reference, they've written Flat is optimized for small rooms where your listening position is closer to the speakers, but no numbers are given. So, what is a small room, and what is closer to the speakers in this case? In his smaller setup, the speakers are 6.5 to 7 feet away. So, should he be using Odyssey Flat? I think we've already talked I mean, first of all, I don't know what any of what Odyssey says means.
Mm.
It doesn't make a ton of sense other than, isn't the Odyssey reference roll off more the top end, right? Is that right?
The whole idea of it is that you would use in their guidelines and their suggestions, you would use the Odyssey flat target curve when you are getting predominantly direct sound and very little reflected sound. So that tends to be if you're sitting physically very close to your speakers, and or you just have a very well-treated room. If you have a well-treated room, you're getting a higher ratio of direct sound to reflected sound, and it tends to be the case that the Odyssey flat target will sound better in those instances because it's just targeting flat. The Odyssey reference is really meant for a more reflective situation where you have a greater amount of reflected sound compared to direct sound, and for that reason they put a little roll off and a little bit of house curve on it, and people tend to prefer that. All of it was done by preference of a panel of listeners. That's how Odyssey tuned their system. So, I mean, 6.5 to 7 feet away would certainly be considered close for a home theater setup. It tends to sort of go by the THX Select or THX Ultra. So if you're 10 feet, that's considered close, and farther than that, you're getting into THX Ultra territory, which is medium or far from the speakers. So under 10 feet, that would be considered close. A small room is like anything under 2,500 cubic feet.
But really, it's personal preference. You can try them both.
Pretty much.
I mean,
and if your room is well treated, you're probably going to want to use flat anyway.
Yeah. So in Gary's smaller setup, this room has 7.1.4. He also has a turntable in there, and he doesn't always want to use upmixing for that. He's noticed that when he switches his Marantz to stereo listening mode, his subwoofer seems to be silent. So how does he get his system playing in 2.1? And if he would like to have the ability to have slightly different crossover and bass setups for 2.1 versus 7.1.4, does he need an outboard stereo preamp? I don't know what he probably told us. The 6011.
Yeah, the 6011.
So the 6011, I don't remember, but it's usually with Marantz and Denons, there is a separate setting for your stereo, stereo settings versus your, all speakers together, all the speaker settings. So you would want to go into the stereo setting, and that's in there. It's in the audio.
It's in the manual setup for the models that have it, but unfortunately, the 6011 does not. It does not have that separate 2-channel mode manual speaker settings. So we can't point you to that. If you have,
yes, you're gonna have to upgrade, Gary. Sorry, I know how you hate spending money.
So if this were actually the case, we're actually going to find out in the next question that the subwoofer actually is active in his setup. But if you are finding that your subwoofer is not active, if you set the subwoofer mode to LFE plus main instead of LFE only, that will make sure that the subwoofer is always at the very least getting a signal. But regardless, if you've set your front, left, right speakers to small, your subwoofer should be active in the stereo listening mode. So if you're using direct or pure direct, that would turn your subwoofer off when you're listening to a 2-channel signal. But he was using the stereo listening mode, so next question, it was in fact on.
All right, so Gary double-checked, and it turned out the subwoofer was still on and playing in stereo listening mode, but he prefers it at a pretty low master volume level, so he wasn't hearing it. He had calibrated subwoofer's volume knob so that it reads 75 dB during Odyssey. If he has Odyssey Dynamic EQ turned on 2.1, phono playback sounds too bass-heavy at his rather low master volume level, but with Dynamic EQ turned off, it sounds as though subwoofer is playing anything at all.
Yeah,
that's
that makes
sense.
The
case.
Yeah,
that was exactly that. If you had asked me to predict what you would experience but at a low volume level, turning dynamic EQ on and off, this was exactly what I would I wouldn't have necessarily predicted that you would think it was bass heavy, but you would definitely be bass.
But I mean, just to keep bass audible, if the rest of your sounds are at like 60 decibels, 55 decibels, just for bass to be audible, it tends to need to be at 65, 70, sometimes 75 decibels, depending on the lowest frequency. So that will sound relatively far too bass heavy if everything else is at like 55.
Sounds like you need to turn your music up, man.
Yeah.
So he manually increased the volume knob on the subwoofer itself until it sounded pleasing to him, but then he has to turn it back down for his surround sound setup. So what can he do in this situation? Turn the volume up when you're listening to music so that it's more in line with your bass.
Turn the master volume up. That's one. But assuming he doesn't want to do that, what's handy in the Marantz is if you press the option button on your remote, it will bring up the ability to change channel levels temporarily. and input by input only. So you are not having to adjust the physical volume knob on the sub. You're not having to adjust the trim levels that were set by Odyssey or in the manual speaker settings. In the options menu, this is a temporary and input by input ability to just boost, in your case, the subwoofer's trim level just for that input, just for that time. So yeah, hit option, and that's what you want to do.
Okay. At the moment when he powers on his Marantz, his Sony OLED also powers on in order for HDMI ARC or audio return channel to work. Okay. So Bravia Sync has to be turned on in its Sony settings. So is there a way to still have ARC working without Sony powering on and off with his Marantz? Probably. I don't know.
So in the Marantz, you do have the option. So it's kind of hidden away. It's in the video section of the settings because that's where the HDMI subsection is. And in there, you have the ability to turn on HDMI control, which is CEC in general. But then separately, you can turn audio return channel and the power syncing on and off. So you would definitely, in your case, want to turn the power syncing off because that's the main thing that you're talking about. But you could, in fact, even turn HDMI control off and just have the audio return channel on, nothing else. So one of those two things should get this working. Try turning off the power sync first. If that doesn't do it, because the text makes it sound like it's only the off command that it responds to and not the on command, so it's a little bit, I'm not quite sure, but turning HDMI control off in the Marantz should get this working.
And then he's going to come back and want to know how he can make it turn on.
Right. Or turn off together.
What it can't do, Gary, is know your intent.
That's
so
right.
It's either going to do it all the time or none of the times. There's not going to be an in-between. That's not going to be some of the times, for some of the inputs or something like that. You could, if you wanted to do that, then you should use a Harmony remote.
Definitely.
And then set different activities so that you're not using ARC ever. Well, you could use
ARC, but not HDMI control.
The control part of it, yes. You would just be using the ARC, and then you wouldn't be using the CEC to turn things on and off. You would just use the Harmony would be the way to go. All right, Colin from Canberra. I don't think I'm saying that right. Australia. I think there's it's kind of like Melbourne is not pronounced. It's Melba.
Sure. Yeah.
Melbourne in Australia. So I think I'm saying that wrong. But anyways, Canberra, Australia. Colin has 65-inch SOLED. SOLED. Wow. This is going to be a fun podcast. I'm blaming dental surgery.
I do too.
Sony A8G OLED and a Denon X250BT 5.1 receiver. His sources are Sony's built-in apps with an Apple TV 4K and Foxtel satellite TV service. So Foxtel. That's like the only cable there, I think. I'm pretty sure. If I remember correctly, it is Foxtel or nothing, and it ain't cheap, Hoss. It is. I was over there all the time there. So he's run into some issues trying to get the best possible audio and video formats from each source. One problem is that his Denon X250BT cannot pass through Dolby Vision, and another is that only two of the Sony's HDMI ports have the full 18 gigabits bandwidth, and one of them is the ARC port. After more trouble than it should have been, he got HDMI ARC, or audio return channel, working. But when he uses the Sony's built-in apps to play Netflix or Amazon Prime Video, he only ever gets regular Dolby Digital 5.1, never Dolby Digital Plus. The Sony is supposed to be able to output Dolby Digital Plus via HDMI ARC, so what's the issue there? Probably the apps that you're using? I don't know that.
No, the apps can do it, and the Sony can do it. The Denon can't. The Denon that you have is a 5.1 receiver only, and what it will accept over the audio return channel is exactly the same as an optical audio connection.
Right.
Its particular implementation of the audio return channel won't do anything more than what an optical audio connection would do. We tend to find that in the 7.1 and particularly Atmos capable receivers, their implementation of the audio return channel can accept a Dolby Digital Plus with an Atmos extension signal, but yours being 5.1 strictly, they didn't bother to put that in there. So unfortunately, you're limited to the same thing as his optical, which is 2-channel PCM or 5.1 Dolby Digital or 5.1 DTS.
So if he plugs his Apple TV 4K into his Denon, he gets multi-channel audio on the Denon's front panel, is that the same as Dolby Digital Plus being decoded inside the Apple TV 4K? It's decoding whatever they have into. In fact, this is the best way for you to get the higher end audio.
Yep.
Through here.
Yep.
Because that's what you can actually get, like, in theory you could get lossless audio this way, not from the Apple TV 4K, but if you had a Blu-ray player, you could get lossless decoded into multi-channel PCM, and then it would be the same as if it were being decoded within the receiver.
That's right.
So this is what you want to see.
Yeah, you are absolutely right that the Apple TV 4K is decoding whatever signal is being sent by the service, the highest quality audio that they are sending. It's decoding it internally and then outputting it as multi-channel PCM.
So the issue with plugging his Apple TV 4K into his Denon is that the Denon won't pass through Dolby Vision. But if he plugs the Apple TV 4K directly into a Sony and then tries to use ARC, it defaults to stereo audio. After playing around with the settings, he got to output 5.1 Dolby Digital through ARC, but never Dolby Digital Plus. Thoughts?
So same thing there. The Denon's implementation of ARC is why the Apple TV 4K going through your television, your Sony television, and then via the audio return channel. It's the Denon part that won't accept anything greater than 5.1 Dolby Digital.
Right.
In this
case.
And
if you wanted to get like some sort of HDMI splitter, he would have to get something like the HD Fury, right? Or they would default to the lowest common denominator there. Is that true? Would the Dolby Digital still go up to the...
Well, the issue is that if it's just a splitter, then the audio signal is still being sent to both.
Right. So he would need something more complex like that, the HD Fury.
You'd need like one that separates the HDMI audio. You'd in fact want the thing that's called the AVR key. The AVR key gives you separated HDMI audio from the HDMI video. So that could potentially do it. But with his last question, I'm going to give him a much simpler answer.
Is it buy a new receiver? I feel like it's buy a new receiver.
I'm going to tell him not to buy anything new.
So how does he get Dolby Vision and Dolby Digital Plus together? If it isn't possible, which one does he sacrifice?
So without buying anything, you are not able to get them both together.
You can't. No.
But here's the thing. Your Sony OLED doesn't display Dolby Vision properly. It hasn't, and the supposedly promised firmware update that they talked about 2 years ago has never materialized, and they have not really spoken about it for about a year.
It's dead to us.
It always looks...
Did you see the new PS5? The PS5's out.
It always looks too dark, and there are like black level issues with Dolby Vision in the Sony, so I would actually kind of prefer not using Dolby Vision on the Sony. It does a fabulous job of showing HDR10. So that's what I would do. In your instance, I would go ahead and plug your Apple TV 4K directly into your Denon. That is giving you the highest quality audio possible. You'll still have HDR10. That's no problem. And just kind of forget about Dolby Vision on your Sony OLED. That would be my advice to you.
I like that. Right. So you buy a new receiver, it passes through Dolby Vision just fine, and suddenly we have to deal with questions. How come it doesn't look good?
Dolby Vision doesn't look good. Yeah.
So don't buy a new receiver, I guess. Michael is constructing a large home theater room, roughly 29 by 19 by 11. And the total volume of air is 6,600 cubic feet.
Mm-hmm.
He immediately thought to go with a pair of SVS's biggest subs, the PB16 Ultras, but that might get a little tight for his budget. Are they appropriate? Are they overkill? I love SVS.
Mm-hmm.
It's once you start getting into like massive rooms, you're paying. SVS makes a sub that can absolutely fill it, and they look beautiful. Because once you get to that price point, they're like, oh yeah, we're not doing any of this cheap stuff anymore. Everything looks
and they
nice.
have nice features like the being able to control it from an app and two-way Bluetooth communication. Yeah.
So if you value all those things, then I have no problems with you saying with SVS and the PB16 Ultras would crush pretty much almost any room.
I think they're pretty appropriate for 6,600 cubic feet, though, because like for me, the 4000 series, which is one step down, that gets you like solid full pressurization at 100 or at 20 hertz, up to about I'd say 5,500 cubic feet to be generous. Really, about 5,000 cubic feet is where you're getting like full reference volume at 20 hertz from a 4,000 series sub. So you've gone significantly past that with your volume of air. So I think the 16 Ultra, if you were sticking with SVS, is a pretty darn appropriate choice.
Yeah. But
you can go less expensive.
Yeah, if you want to save money, then you're going to have to give up features and you're going to have to give up looks. Yeah. But you can then, look at some place like HSU might have something that would help you out. Power Sound Audio definitely will.
Power Sound Audio, yeah, that's...
Rhythmic might have something in there too.
Yep.
But Power Sound Audio and would be my first place to look.
Yeah.
Because they build big, ugly boxes that make lots of noise.
And they're going to go give you an 18-inch driver, not a 16, to get you here. So a little bit less amplifier power, actually, but a larger diameter driver in a even bigger box. Now, you have a big room, so I'm not super concerned that essentially a 2-foot cube won't physically fit, but that's more or less what you're looking at. I'm going to be pointing you at their V18 and the big boy version, the one with the ridiculous driver that uses neodymium magnets, like far too much neodymium. But it's super powerful because that's the one that equals the output of a PB16 Ultra, but they're $1,850 instead of $2,500. That's a significant cost savings.
Yeah.
So that's the one to go for. To get similar output from Rhythmic, you're looking at about $2,500 still, so there's not really a huge cost savings. And nobody else's like 15-inch, single 15-inchers are really going to equal the same output. So for the least amount of money to get the same output, Power Sound Audio is the way to go. And yeah, they're V18 with the upgraded driver.
So the plan includes 2 feet of space behind an acoustically transparent screen. Is that enough space to accommodate SVS's largest Ultra towers, or would the Prime Pinnacle towers be a better choice? 2 feet of space, so 24 inches of space. If I remember correctly, those Ultra towers are like triangular at the base, right? They extend out.
Yeah, the tower comes down and then the back kind of slopes outward
out
back. And then it's got a 8-inch woofer facing sideways on each.
Now that doesn't bother me. Does it have rear? I'm sure it has rear ports, right?
The upper section does, yeah.
Yeah.
24 inches. And they're about 1.5 feet. They say they're 17 inches deep on the website, the Ultra towers.
That would be for the entire foot section?
That's the full depth. At its deepest, it's 17, whereas the Pinnacle is 14, so it's only a 3-inch difference in the footprint.
And you might be actually looking at the... where the ports are, it's actually probably pretty similar in comparison. I think you can do this. You're going to be awfully close to that wall as far as the port is concerned, but I think you could do this.
I think if you put, it's all going behind acoustically transparent, so you don't have to worry about looks. I think you put some 4-inch insulation along your front wall. The front of the speaker needs to be about 2 inches behind your screen, and that all just fits. It all just fits.
Right.
So I think you're fine with I think the Ultra towers are a good way to go here, honestly. You want maximum output. You want the best tweeter that they have on offer.
Right.
The mid-bass output, having that additional bass driver.
And he's not going to be sitting super close to these speakers anyways.
Super close.
So having a tower speaker seems a lot more appropriate than some of our listeners.
Oh, yeah. This all makes sense here.
I think it makes sense to go with I don't know that I would have a hard time pairing the PB16 Ultras with the Pinnacles. It just doesn't. Something doesn't sit right with me. Lastly, he asked, do we have a set routine for auditioning speakers? Everyone tells him to just listen to content he's familiar with, but do we have something more specific he could follow to make sure he's evaluating the full capabilities of the speakers? And for me specifically, is there a difference in my approach for a professional review versus a speaker audition just for personal use? All right, so what people are telling you is correct, right? You should be listening to content that you're familiar with, but you should refamiliarize yourself with whatever that content is, and then it shouldn't just be stuff you like. Like, no one cares I care. You care. No, you could be like the biggest Linkin Park fan on the planet, right? Do not use Linkin Park as your audition material, okay? This is the time for you to pick some tracks that are recommended by other people, and they don't have to be things that you spend an inordinate amount of time with. It's not something you're just go around listening to your car in your headphones when you're jogging or whatever. No, this is something that you're going to listen to for very specific things to outline the performance of a speaker. And then feel free, after you've done like those sort of basic checks, then you go and you put on something that you like or something that you feel an emotional attachment to, and then listen to them at that point and see how that makes how they make you feel. And if you listen to or you read reviews, at least if you read my reviews, but if you read reviews, a lot of times you'll hear stuff like this suggested. Put them through their paces, and then I started listening to one of my old favorites, Diana Krall, in Reno or Rio, not Reno. I don't think she'd go to Reno, but in Rio, live in Rio, or something like that. And then they'll talk about that album. But what they really did is they sat there before and they went through like their little test discs that they have, and they listened for very specific things that gave them the insight of what the speaker is actually capable of. And then they talk about these other albums to make themselves look like they're sophisticated, which is almost always the case.
One issue with only listening to stuff that you love is that you've gotten used to hearing it a certain way on other systems.
Yeah.
And it's difficult to separate, well, if this sounds different, is it sounding different because it's actually more accurate to the original signal, or is it just that I preferred what I was used to, so this sounds wrong to me now? So it's a little bit hard to evaluate in that sense. I do like to try and find musical tracks that have specific instruments, because instruments sound the way that they sound, more or less. And if it gives you that real sense of I am listening to live instruments actually playing, well, that tends to be a pretty convincing sense of realism. Whereas if you go, well, that's clearly coming out of a speaker, then you gotta go, well, it's not giving me that sense of a recorded concert realism. So for evaluation, I do like to use instrumental. Prior to using voice, I actually like to start with sweeps first to make sure that I'm getting a pretty darn linear signal playing a sweep, which by no means tells you that much, but tells you whether or not you're got something really, really hinky in your frequency response. And then I like to listen to things that feature a certain instrument. I like to focus on things that feature a bassoon and feature a glockenspiel, so that I hear the mid-range tones in the bassoon and the overtones that go with it that give that sense of realism, and then a glockenspiel for the really, really tinkly highs, same sort of thing there, and then get into vocals, because the human voice should sound like the human voice and give you that eerie sense of realism if your speakers are really good.
So Rob's coming at you from a perspective of somebody who's played an instrument. And he's very familiar with that instrument, so he listens for that.
Well, I haven't played a bassoon, but well, I played in amateur orchestras.
So he's very familiar with the live sound of that particular instrument.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's a great thing to have. That's a great thing. If you've got something like that, then you can put in a guitar track that should, an acoustic guitar or something like that,
piano.
that should sound, or piano should sound in certain ways. And most of us are very familiar with pianos, how pianos sound in real life, especially if you're like almost, it feels like all of us who have at one point or another been forced to take lessons by our parents. We at least have this sort of,
it's got to be one of the more common instruments.
Right. So what I have, over the years, I've collected a number of tracks that have specific sounds that I listen for. So, I've listened to these specific tracks, numerous times across numerous speakers. And, I will be able to, almost instantly pick out, oh, this one is showcasing this, this undertone or this very light, cymbal sound that I know is there. But that most speakers cover up. But this speaker is not doing that. If you've got a track, and there's lots of them out there, it doesn't have to be a specific song or whatever, but just any sort of track. Like Queen was famous for like using stereo imaging and switching things around. So you could find one that has a pan side to side, and play that, and you just listen. You're like, okay, well, this is how it sounds on my speakers, that I currently have, and you listen to it, 5 or 6, 10, 20 times or whatever, however long it takes, so you feel like you've really heard it. And then when you go and you get these other speakers in there, then you do the same thing, and a bunch of little things like that: female vocals, hi-hat, piano, low tones, the kind of weird little rumble that some songs have that don't always get picked up or don't always get showcased. You know, I have like a certain number, and this comes back from just years of experience, but also we did that shootout many years ago in at my house up in Jacksonville, and we put together like a CD sampler that had. And no, I can't give it to you because it's all pirate. We all, I mean, it was just stuff we burned and put on one disc, and they're all tracks. So we would listen to the first couple of seconds of it, or first 30 seconds of it, and then skip to the next one, and listen to that and skip to the next one, and listen to that and skip to the next one. So having something like that in your back pocket is always kind of nice. Then when I'm auditioning for myself, I do that same thing. When a speaker comes in here, when I'm listening to a speaker, I just don't stick it in the movie. I mean, I can, and I have, but I don't consider that to be part of the evaluation because, there's, I mean, the movie is so much more than just
too much. It's hard to separate and really pay attention to particular aspects of the sound.
So having something having a time where you can sit down and actually just pay attention. The most important thing is that you have before this sat down and paid attention to your own speakers or to or other speakers, and then so that you have a basis for comparison. Yes, we have like a 3-second memory for audio, but that's for small, insignificant changes. Okay, it's not the difference between a reclining couch and a non-reclining couch is not subtle, right?
Right.
You sit on one and you're like, well, this one is fabric and the other one was leather, so that's obvious. And then this one reclines, the other one doesn't recline. That's also obvious. Now, which one is more comfortable? You probably want to bounce between the two, right? For a length of time, and before you can really decide that. And that's sort of the way it is with this music. What I do is try to pick out these tracks that show me obvious differences, and then I can go and then spend some time with music I like in order to maybe tease out a little bit more. But most of the rest of that is all just flowery language. If the speaker is performing pretty well, like Rob says, a suite doesn't tell you a whole lot, except that it tells you how linear that speaker is in that room, which is an important thing to be told.
It can reveal if there's something egregiously wrong.
Right. All right, JR auditioned and bought a Rotel and B&W system that someone local was selling off. These are older models from about 2001. A Rotel 1066 Pre-Pro that does not have any HDMI inputs and technically has 7 speaker outputs and a 6.1 analog input, but the most it can decode is Dolby Digital EX and DTS ES. And its upmixing can create a center back, so it's a 6.1 channel processor, which is, I mean, in 2001, that was still pretty.
That was around at the time. State of the art.
A 5 by 200 watt Rotel amp. And the 5.1 B&W CDM NT series speaker package. It's tower, center, surrounds, and sub. JR already has a 7.1 system consisting of Denon 3310 CI receiver and Mirage speakers and all sub all around. He's got an Apple TV 4K, PS4, cable box, and Blue Sound Node 2i. I don't know what that is for streaming music.
It's a network player.
Yeah, I got that. His TV is an older 1080p Samsung model. He's got the speaker set up, and he's got some acoustic foam behind them now. That center channel is I feel like there's some sort of weird visual thing happening where it makes it look like it's stretched out. I don't know why.
It's angled at the top, so
very odd.
You see how the tower speakers are angled because we're seeing them from an angle because of the perspective of the camera. Then the top of that center is
very fat center channel, man. It's very fat.
Chunky. It's a chunky boy.
So he says that upgrading sound quality after replacing his Mirage speakers is so noticeable that even his wife agreed it was worth it. Aw, the wife. We always treat our wives as if they couldn't possibly have any opinion about audio. They just don't. Like, I know that many people don't care about audio, but it's not gender specific. I've had lots of men in my home theater are like, yeah, this is dumb. I'm getting out of here. All right, well, thanks. for coming. But with the limitations of the Rotel Pre-Pro and the fact that the seller had lost the Rotel remote, he's decided to use his Denon as a Pre-Pro for the time being. That lets him retain his HDMI switching. And he can also continue to use one pair of his Mirage speakers as surround backs in the 7.1 configuration, which he does enjoy having for movies. But he has it in mind that since the Rotel Pre-Pro cost more when it was new, and because it is matched to the Rotel 5-channel amp, it surely will sound better than his Denon. Well, this is going to be an uncomfortable conversation we're about to have, sir. Yeah. I'm sorry to break it to you, but you're not going to like what we say next. But let us continue reading. If the Rotel Pre-Pro and Rotel Amp together clearly sound better than using his Denon, could he plug his HDMI sources into his TV and then use his TV optical audio output to send audio to the Rotel? What compromises would he be making if he does that? I mean, so many.
No lossless audio. No,
that would be gone.
Lossless audio at all.
Audio would be gone.
Although the Rotel doesn't decode Dolby True HD and DTS HD master audio, so you're not losing that. But I guess it can't do multi-channel PCM unless it's analog either.
He's also got a older Samsung TV. It might just be sending down stereo.
Oh yeah, and Samsung has never supported DTS of any kind, so you would be Dolby Digital 5.1 at best, and possibly 2-channel only. Yeah, very possibly actually 2-channel only. Yeah, that's a lot to give up. This is not what you want to do, and furthermore, I wouldn't suggest using the Rotel Pre-Pro in this setup. Like I said,
I would sell that thing.
You won't be getting lossless audio.
Audio gone is your friends, or there's somebody out there that's been looking for this thing for a while, and he would love to have it, or she would love to have it. So please sell it to them, because this has no place in your home.
It also has no equalization, no room correction, whereas your Denon does have. It's the older version of Odyssey, but it does have a version of Odyssey. So
anything's better than nothing in that case.
I wouldn't be recommending doing this. Giving up lossless audio entirely and every form of DTS, I'm like, that doesn't make sense.
If it makes you feel better, you can get like a piece of tape and write Rotel on it and put it over the Denon. I think that would be enough. That's my suggestion. So if he ends up wanting to use the Rotel Pre-Pro and 5-channel amp, then
that's against our advice, but let's take it as wrote.
But he also wants to keep a 7-speaker setup. Could he use his Denon as a 2-channel amp? And how would the Rotel Pre-Pro create a 7-speaker output when it doesn't have HDMI inputs? Isn't optical limit to 5.1? I mean, technically, no. I mean, it does.
I can do Dolby Digital EX, can't it? Optical could send an EX signal, but the signal would have to be EX. But he did mention
finding one of those.
the Rotel Pre-Pro that he has, it does have the ability to upmix a center rear channel. So it doesn't use Dolby Pro Logic 2X, but it does have its own upmixing to a 6.1 mix. So you definitely could take the pre-outs from the Rotel Pre-Pro, plug it into any stereo input of your Denon, and use your Denon now as a 2-channel amp. That is certainly doable. And they would be in mono, because that is all the Rotel can do. It has 2 back outputs, but they are in mono. It is only a 6.1 channel Pre-Pro.
Yeah. So he envisioned listening to music in only 2-channel, but the B&W speaker sounds so good to him that he's found himself using upmixing and enjoying that. Dude, you really don't want to use this Rotel.
Yeah.
If you're enjoying upmixing 2-channel,
with Dolby Pro Logic 2X, that's
So his Denon uses, like you said, Pro Logic 2X upmixing, which puts sounds in all 7 speakers, but his Mirage surround backs are not keeping up. He does still like having them for movies. So is there an easy way to have the Denon upmix to 7 speakers for movies, but only upmix to 5 speakers for music? Easy? No, but you could just tell it that you don't have surround backs when you want to listen to music, I guess.
That would be a manual speaker settings change. Yeah. So which that affects your Odyssey configuration as well. So that's a whole to do. Now, options are potentially buying a new AV receiver to use as a pre-pro.
Sure.
And in this instance, if this is what you really want to do, you want to have all 7 speakers active for movies, but only 5 speakers active, but still with upmixing for music, then you'd want to get an AV receiver with pre-outs, of course, that can also have 2 preset configurations. So Yamaha can do that for you, and the newest Denons that are about to come out would be able to do that. You'd be looking at like the X3700H to do this, because that gives you 2 preset configuration choices and a full set of pre-outs. So that's a lot, though. That's money being spent, and you just spent a whole whack of money. So yeah, the only way, there's no easy way to do this with what you have. You'd have to manually change settings around. You could just physically disconnect your surround backs.
Well, yeah, I guess that
you can just unplug them.
Don't try to be careful not to.
Yes, make sure the Denon is off when you do that. But
yeah. Oh, and once they're off and they're unconnected, unless you unconnect them from the back of the Denon, which would be harder than taking them out from the back of the speaker, I suppose. Just don't do the Rotel thing at all. I think is the consensus here. There's nothing that Rotel Pre-Pro has that is in any way necessary for making the amp do the thing that the amp does.
Right.
And there's no feature that the Pre-Pro has that the Denon doesn't have or have a superior version of.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
I honestly think in his current setup, he should sell off the Rotel Pre-Pro. Just say goodbye to that.
Yep.
Keep the Denon as your Pre-Pro, and say goodbye to your Mirage surround back speakers, and acclimatize yourself to 5.1 with your BNW speakers, and go ahead and keep the Rotel amp. I'm sure that is stellar. I have no doubts of that.
Yep.
And go with 5.1. That's what I think you should do here.
And if you really, really want the surround backs, then, find some B&W backs. Just keep your eyes open for them. Save that money. Adam's theater room is still under construction. Drywall is not up yet, so he still has the option to make changes. As a reminder, the dimensions are roughly 11.5 by 23.5 by 8 feet. But it's wider at the back for the entrance, and there will be soffits going along the sides. Okie dokie.
These are older. It's an older photo, but that's what I had. So to give an idea.
He has Polk speakers on hand. He was thinking he would upgrade it to SVS speakers. The last time he wrote to us, he was saying how he would really prefer to avoid in-walls and in-ceiling speakers since soundproofing is a priority. We said SVS prime satellites and surrounds and private elevation speakers are mounted on the insides of the soffits mounted on the insides of the soffits and up against the ceiling, as Atmos speakers would be perfect. So he ordered some to try them out while his room was under construction. He compared the SVS speakers to his Polks, and even though they're just the satellites, the SVS did sound better than the fronts for stereo. Yeah, okay. Well, this is not a fair test, but let's go. Simply due to budget, he'll likely keep his Polk fronts for a while, but a future front speaker upgrade will happen at some point. In the surround positions, though, he really couldn't hear a difference. Furthermore, it's easy to get to his back row of seats since the room is wider back there, but for his primary row, he needs a walkway, and the room is only 11.5 feet wide. In the front section, so even the prime satellites stick out a bit too much. So he's thinking, could he go cheaper on the surrounds since he really didn't hear a worthwhile difference, and he might be forced to go in walls just so he doesn't hit his head on the speaker getting to his primary seat. And with the walls still open, putting in soundproof backer boxes is entirely possible. Polk has several inexpensive in-wall options, so what do we think we should do? So we're looking at a room that's completely unfinished. There's no furniture in here to speak of, I'm guessing. The drywall's not up, so that means that there's no carpet down, and he may have put like a folding chair or something in there so that he could experience this. To do a listening test in this room and draw any conclusions from it is it's a very suspect. I would be suspect of any of the conclusions that you would draw. Hearing a difference in the fronts versus the rears or whatever, the side surrounds. We're looking at a room that's just nothing but reflections at this point. It's just stuff bouncing around and being weird. I'm sure it's echoey as heck in there. I don't think that you can make the sort of judgments that you're making here, honestly.
At the same time, it's not like totally out to lunch at all in what I would anticipate the end results being in a fully finished and treated room, if these were the results that he said, they wouldn't be shocking to me. I mean, we don't tend to hear as well for the surround positions as we do the front speakers. We often say, if you've got a skimp somewhere, I mean, start with the overheads, skimp all you want there. Then the surround backs, by all means, skimp on the surround backs or even eliminate them. And then if you still have to skimp further on the surrounds, not on your fronts, right? So that's not way out to lunch.
The thing that concerns me more than you hearing a difference between these two speakers, which I don't put a whole lot of stock in that. I think that once you get this room finished, you may find yourself having a completely different opinion. Is the fact that you're afraid it's going to be sticking out too far.
Yeah.
And that, of course, is a real consideration that should be addressed. And if you decide you're going to go with in walls, there are plenty of good options out there. Like you said, you've heard the Polks, that's fine. We've often recommended Ascend. Is it Ascend? No, Aperion. Is it Aperion?
Yeah, with Aperion, they've done away with their entire Intimus series, which was the nice, inexpensive series. So now the only in-walls that Aperion is offering is the Clearest series, which are more expensive. So that's unfortunate. They're not going to be as easy a go-to anymore, sadly.
Right. If we're assuming that you're going to go with SVS up front eventually, we know that all we have to do is find you a fairly neutral speaker to go in your walls there, and you'd be okay. So the usual suspects, RBH, of course,
for sure,
would be good. They are probably going to be expensive, compared to some of the other things.
Yeah, they're more expensive than the Prime satellites, price-wise.
I don't necessarily. I know that you're familiar with Polks, but I don't necessarily think I would stick with Polks. If you're trying to upgrade away from them, then side surrounds, I guess, if you're really if you like their form factor and their price, that's fine. But there's probably some other options out there we would point you towards.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, since originally his idea was to not have any big holes in his walls, there are some exceedingly skinny speakers. RBH makes their Ultra One skinny speakers that are like 1.5 inches from front to back. But they're about $800 for a pair, so it's actually more expensive than what you're going on, but you're doing it for the form factor without giving up sound quality. Kef also, of course, has their T-Series speakers, the T101s, which you can actually get at Accessories for Less for $400 a pair. So at that point, they're still a little bit more than your Prime satellites in cost, even from Accessories for Less, but it's getting you the form factor of those are less than 1.5 inches from front to back. So if you want speakers that are exceedingly thin from front to back and you don't have to put any holes in your walls, those do exist. So I'll just mention those. But as far as like if you do end up going in-wall surrounds go, yeah, it's a little bit tough. I wish the Aperion Intimus were still around. Those would have been a really easy recommendation, but now the price is more and it's the Clearest series. I guess you could step down to mono price if you really want to get the price down. You could go with like the Alpha series, which are pretty decent. But yeah, that's a step down from SVS, to be sure. There is ELAC's debut series, but they're not nearly as cost effective as they really ought to be. I'm kind of disappointed in the pricing on those. So, honestly, some of the nicer Polks are not a bad choice. I'm not super against that. The thing about Polk to me is I've never considered them like the best. They're not the last word in detail. They're not some of the things that I look for as standout, ultra raise the hair on the back of your neck realism, but they are also, to me, always inoffensive. I have never listened to a pair of Polk speakers and gone, ooh, that sounds not right. That sounds bad. Like, they're inoffensive if they're anything. So as surrounds, they're a pretty good choice in my opinion.
Okay. I have heard some Polks that I was offended by, but they were tower speakers and probably older. So I will give them a break. So he tried out the Prime Elevations as Atmos speakers. His first impressions was, are they even on? He goosed them a bit, and after listening for a while, he was able to hear what they were contributing. But is that it? Atmos is seeming like a pretty minimal upgrade if that's all it's doing. Let's stop right there for a second. Again, unless you're doing this in a different room that I'm not familiar with.
No, it was this room.
I don't see how you can make any. I mean, so much reflected sound going on in here. It would be, and as somebody who has never said meh harder than he did at Atmos, I am going to defend Atmos for a second and say, okay, this is not the time to be doing listening tests. You don't go into an auditorium, with nobody in it and put speakers in there and listen and decide whether or not they sound good. It's just ridiculous because that's not the environment you're going to be listening to them. I know we tell you, take the speakers home, listen to them, and then decide. Well, that assumes that you have a room.
Yes.
Okay. At least completed room. So doing these listening tests is not, I don't think this is really fair. That being said, yeah, I mean, you may still have this exact same opinion of Atmos.
Oh yeah, I'm not going to blame anybody who listens to Atmos and goes, that's not a big deal to me. Like I've mentioned before, the same people who listen to surround backs and go, that's not a big deal to me, I don't think are going to magically listen to Atmos and go, oh, that's so amazing. Whereas if you added surround backs and you're like, hey, I really like that, then I think you're the type of person who might add Atmos and go, oh, I like that too.
So he compared the prime elevations to one pair of Polk OWM3 speakers he has on hand with nothing but the Atmos speakers playing. Yes, the prime elevations sound a little bit better, but with Atmos doing so little overall, he doesn't feel he can justify the cost. He knows Rob doesn't like the Polks, but they're under $100 a pair, so can he get just one more pair of those?
Yeah, I just said Polks are inoffensive. Again, the OWMs threes I don't consider offensive, but I really don't think they're good.
No, I mean, it's very, I know you're excited about this room. I know you are. And I know you're trying to make sure that you're making all the right purchases and all that other stuff. And maybe you bought too early and it's driving you kind of crazy. I just don't think you can make these
evaluations.
It's just, this is not the room. You're not in your room yet. This is worse than, I'm not going to say worse. I've been in showrooms that were worse than what room you're in right now. I've been in showrooms that were nothing but wood and glass. So, one semi-comfortable chair, off to the side or something. But you can't make these kind of evaluations on how things are going to sound. I just don't think so. That being said, yeah, Atmos. I still would probably prefer the prime elevations over the Polks, but
I mean, I'll tell you what I would go for, because if you're like the prime elevations, I'm thinking I've spent a bit too much for Atmos speakers, I can get behind that. I would point you to those Boston Acoustics Soundware 4.5s from Accessories for Less. That's what I would put in place for Atmos speakers.
Right. With prime satellites on hand, he was able to test different surround speaker locations. He tried Dolby's positions with them directly to his sides and the ear height, and he tried between 1 and 2 feet behind him with various heights above seated ear height. He found that with 1.5 feet behind him and about 5 feet off the ground, about 1.5 feet above the seated height, is where he thought they sounded best, and that seems to line up with what we typically recommend, correct? Yes. But it also could be because this is where you got the least offensive reflections in this room. But he's going to have a 1 foot riser for his back row, so that means the second pair of surround speakers will be a foot higher and only 2 feet from the ceiling. And then for surround backs, that would make it would make sense for them to be at 6 feet as well, right? So they have a good clearance behind his back row. So that's making him question where to wire for Atmos. He was planning to start with speakers in the front and behind his primary rows of seats only, but with everything open, he was thinking he could wire for 6 Atmos speakers, and 1 pair could go behind his back row of seats. But if the surrounds and surround backs are only 2 feet below the ceiling, will that interfere with Atmos sounds? How should he pre-wire for a potential 7.2.6 setup? This is a guy who just a second ago said he didn't think Atmos was doing much, and now he wants to wire for six overhead speakers.
Although the wiring, when everything is open, that's the time to do it, and it's cheap. So,
so yes, I see what you're saying, and it may be even. You may want your surround backs even higher. It depends on the height of your seats. If you're going to get recliners that have high backs, you want those speakers not to be blown into the back of the back row of seats.
But about 2 feet above your seated ear height, that should that should be perfect for clearance.
Should be. So I mean, if I were going to do this, I would, if you think about it, you put your top middles right above you, and then you're going to put your top fronts and top rears is what you're going to go for. You can't go in this situation. You can't go for front heights and rear heights. I don't think, because your
and he's using the soffit to ceiling corner anyway, which is great placement. I think you've got good separation no matter what. because your side surround speakers are going to be on your side walls at a minimum 2 feet below the ceiling. And then your Atmos speakers are going to be closer in because they're on the insides of the soffits and right up against the ceiling. I don't see any problem as far as things sounding redundant here. And I think your plan is, as far as wiring goes, whether you actually end up with that many speakers, who knows? But as far as wiring it goes, I think your plan is sound.
So his Denon X3600H receiver was delivered, and of course the 3700 was just announced. Will he be missing out if he keeps the 36? Should he send it back? No, you should definitely keep it.
There is one feature that you'll be missing out on in the case of the 37 versus 36, which is the 2 presets. The 3700 gives you the 2 presets where you could have 2 completely separate, different speaker configurations or Atmos or Odyssey configurations, 2 completely separate ones the 3700 can store. You can still do that with the 3600. You just have to save and load using a USB stick or the app. So it's not that you can't do it, it's just not quite as convenient. But the 3600 was like the most advanced feature-wise of all the receivers in Denon's lineup in 2019. And, of course, there's the single HDMI 2.1 input on the 3700. But, yeah, it won. You're still going to have to use eARC with the 3700, so you can use eARC with the 36. So, yeah, in your case, you got a great receiver. Don't send it back.
So he has an old Onkyo receiver on hand. He was thinking that that would suffice as a dumb amp to expand his Denon from 5.2.4 to 7.2.4 if he wants to. But since he is going to have 2 pairs of side surround speakers, should he use this Onkyo to power those, or would the Denon have no problem with 2 pairs of side surrounds? You could go either way. So the way that I would consider doing this is I would use a Y splitter on my surround out,
pre-out?
basically.
Okay.
Pre-out, and then run 2 to whatever speaker inputs you want to put on there, and that way you don't have to wire things in parallel or in series or anything. Okay. You just do it that way, straight to the Onkyo.
And the Onkyo, you'd be using its like zone 2 to power the second pair.
Right.
Because I don't think his Onkyo has 7.1 analog ins.
Oh, it doesn't. Okay.
I don't think so.
Yeah. Okay. No. So that would be the I was thinking it had analog inputs, in which case you would just have to put it to multi-channel input, and that would be the end of that. But if it doesn't have that, then yes, you would have to use your zone 2. That being said, the Denon could do it just fine just by running them in series.
Yeah. And also his side walls are really close.
Yeah.
He's got 11.5
foot
wide.
Run them in parallel, probably.
Yeah, so
fine,
you aren't going to be asking for a lot of power from your side surrounds. Even with 2 pairs of them, your Denon will power those just fine.
Manuel is the fellow who had his Onkyo receiver and 1 pair of AV123 MFW15 subwoofers. Both die around the same time. He put in the old Pioneer receiver, no HDMI audio, into service as a stopgap. He was also hoping to add a Send Sierra center to his setup, since he is running a Phantom Center at the moment, but he has only had $800 to spend. So he said to make do with a single sub for the time being, don't pay $500 for a repair, and spend his budget on a new receiver. So he did that. But now his second subwoofer just died.
Yeah. AV123. Fantastic.
It's the
it lasted
gift
this
that
long.
Keeps on giving. You know what? I mean, the problems, most of the problems with AV123, aside from all the lying about so many things, was the fact that he basically stole people's products, essentially. Right. He would tell them that he would be a storefront from them. They could sell them, and then he would sell for them, and then keep it all, and basically stole. So the products themselves weren't necessarily good or bad. They were just not his, for the most part. The products that he was making himself, he mostly lied about and took your money anyways. So his room is enclosed, 16 by 19 by 8, so about 2,500 cubic feet. He is used to lots of deep bass output from his former dual 15-inch sub setup. He has another $800 to spend. So does that mean he's got $1,600 to spend, or does that mean he's got $800 again?
Well, the receiver's already been bought, so now it's a new $800 budget.
Okay. So he really only cares about one seating position, so what should he get? Does he stick with a ported sub, or should he try a sealed model this time? SVS has their PB2000 blowout special going on. Should he hop on that?
Yes.
I would think
Very
so.
simple answer.
I'm clicking on it right now, but yeah, if you're looking for a lot of bass with a low price point and a very good sub, the PB2000 is $700 right now.
Yeah. Yes. Hop on that.
It's a big old box.
2,500, but he was used to the MFW 15-inch sub. So 2,500 cubic feet, you will pressurize this all day long, and the volume knob probably won't be beyond, I don't know, not quite halfway up there. Probably not even that. No, that's a fantastic choice for you, having been used to the MFW 15. A PB2000 at the discounted price, hop on it.
Jay wants a soundbar. No, sorry, we don't do soundbars here. Next question.
Not true. I'm happy to.
Ow. Sorry, Jay. Jay wants a soundbar solution for about $500 or less. He's really hoping for a model with a dedicated center, a good subwoofer, and actual rear speakers. He's tried a 2.1 LG soundbar, and that didn't cut it. It will be connected to a TCL 6 Series TV. What do we suggest? I have no clue.
Yeah, so actually,
for the good subwoofer part of it.
Well, I mean, relatively speaking, relatively good for a soundbar package. Now, if you're looking around for a 5.1 soundbar solution that has actual physical rear speakers, you're mostly going to see Vizio being recommended. I don't super duper agree with that. They're not bad, but I don't think you're going to be over the moon with that. Thanks to Accessories for Less, you can get a 5.1 soundbar package that normally would cost, I think the retail price is actually $650, but they're typically found for about $550. But over at Accessories for Less, it's $330, so we're within your budget, and that is from Polk. It is their Magnify, Fi with a F-I because it's fidelity, Magnify Max SR, this SR meaning that it comes with physical surround speakers. They are wireless, so that's convenient, although you have to plug them into the wall for power, so there still is a cord, but there's no wires running between the soundbar and the surrounds or the subwoofer and the surrounds. And it actually comes with an 8-inch subwoofer, which as far as soundbar packed-in subwoofers go, is about as good as you can get. It's been measured and genuinely plays down to about 35 hertz, which as far as soundbar pack-in subwoofers go, is pretty darn decent. It does have a dedicated driver for the center channel, so it's all the things that you asked for. It can play louder than most other soundbars as well, so that will be handy. That one. We'll have the link for it. But the Polk Magnify Max SR over at Accessories for Less to get the price where you want it.
Okie dokie. Aiden.
Uh-huh.
I don't think I've ever had an Aiden on this podcast. Is that possible? In all these years?
Ow.
I can't think of a single person. I would think, because I have a cousin named Aiden.
Okay.
A nephew named Aiden. And I think it would have rung in my memory. Because as soon as I saw his name, I was like, oh, yeah, just like my nephew. Huh.
Well, that's it.
There we go. Aiden. Aiden got a 65-inch Sony A8G OLED. It doesn't do Dolby Vision very well, in case you're wondering.
Not particularly well, no.
Ertings has settings posted. Do we agree with their suggestions? He's using it in the living room with lights on. I think we normally do. You normally agree with Ertings?
Yeah. So they've gotten better over the years. There's not a lot to disagree with. So they always target a 2.2 gamma, which in the setting that you described, a living room with lights on, that's fine. I'm like, yep, 2.2 gamma is what you want to use in that type of lit setting. So the settings that they give for the custom picture mode for standard dynamic range, those all looked good to me. What I don't super duper think is necessary is for some reason they chose to use a different picture mode for HDR, which the Sony doesn't need to do. With the Sonys, when an HDR signal comes in, it stays in the same picture mode, but just an HDR variant of it where it kicks the, in this case, OLED light setting, or Sony has labeled it as brightness, and now changed what used to be called brightness to black level, which is actually the correct description, but just makes it confusing as to what means what. But the brightness will be automatically kicked up to full, and the contrast enhancer thingy will be set to full for HDR. So that's about the only thing. I don't think you need to change picture modes for SDR to HDR. But other than that, their settings look good.
Did you just answer the second question?
Pretty much, yeah. Although not quite, because gaming is involved. So, yeah.
Ertings suggests using the custom picture mode for SDR and Cinema Pro picture mode for HDR, and the default Dolby Vision mode for Dolby Vision, and the game mode for the lowest input lag. But other than Dolby Vision, the A8G does not automatically switch picture modes. Is there a way to do so?
So no, it doesn't have auto low latency mode. Like I say, I don't think you need to switch between custom and Cinema Pro for going between standard dynamic range and high dynamic range. So that one will switch automatically. And Dolby Vision, if you are using it, will switch automatically to that. So really, it's only the game mode. So when you're playing a game, you will manually put it into game mode. That is the only way to get the nice low latency. It has not great latency in all the other picture modes, so you will actually want to do that. But there's no automatic way to do it. You could make a sequence or a macro in your Harmony.
So while watching HDR, some dark images and shadow detail are tough to make out. Is that just to be expected? Are you using Dolby Vision?
Was it Dolby Vision? It's definitely to be expected if it was Dolby Vision, which if he was using the built-in Netflix app or the built-in Disney Plus or the built-in Amazon Prime, it probably was Dolby Vision.
He's using it in the living room with lights on.
Yeah,
so
that too.
Making out shadow detail in dark areas with lights on, you're setting your TV up for failure. I mean, honestly.
Bit. What really helps on the Sony is turning up, I believe they call it their dynamic it's like dynamic X-tended contrast, something. It's like a dynamic extended contrast. It's right in the first part of the picture settings menu. If you turn that up a little bit, it does tend to, like, it's not accurate to the HDR signal anymore, but it tends to brighten the whole darn thing, which actually Ratings does mention in their settings
I am
page.
not going to call it that other thing that you say because there's no A and there's just
search
no A.
engine optimization.
Aiden has a separate dedicated theater room in which he has a 120-inch silver ticket screen and a Sony HW45ES projector at the moment. He's thinking of upgrading to a 4K projector, and it seems like the JVC NX7 is the top choice for under 10 grand. But he's a Sony fan, and their genuine 4K VW695ES is about the same price. Does it compete in picture quality? I'm going to guess no.
I mean, overall, it's not super far off, but for HDR, the JVC kicks its booty. For HDR, the JVC is what you want to get. It has frame-by-frame dynamic tone mapping, where it analyzes the signal itself and adjusts for the HDR signal, and nobody else has that right now except for one LG projector, which isn't in the same category. So, I think it's time to venture out to another brand and get the JVC.
All right. When he upgrades his projector, should he also get a new screen? He plans to stick with 120 inches, so no changes in screen size, but the silver ticket was so inexpensive. Could the better screen maximize picture quality? Did he say how big his room was? He didn't say.
Didn't mention the theater room, but the screen size isn't changing.
If you're not changing the screen size and you're not sitting so close that you're now that you're saying, oh, I can see the weave or the bumps or the something.
I mean, it doesn't sound like it's acoustically transparent. So if it's the fixed frame,
I can see
standard.
no reason to change this whatsoever.
So,
I mean, I know you're like it's so cheap. I should buy something more expensive. You feel free, and then please come back here and tell us how you didn't see a difference.
Right.
Because
I mean,
you're not
truly, technically, objectively, via measurement, there is such a thing as a white screen out there with even less color shift than the silver ticket, but which would be like a Stewart film screen, Cinemat 1.0, which is like the industry standard, right? Does exist, but the color shift of the silver ticket is so little, and if you're measuring it with CalMan or something, easy to calibrate against. It would take a tiny tweak of the calibration from the projector to account for the tiny little bit of color shift so effectively, no, there's no justifiable reason to spend more on a screen.
Are we time wise? Oh, we got time. Dan upgraded his theater to his Forever speakers, a full set of Paradigm Prestige speakers. This meant his previous Paradigm Monitor series speakers could either be sold or repurposed. He decided to use them in other rooms around the house for whole house audio. He's using the Google Home ecosystem. He has on hand one pair of monitor 9 towers, one pair of monitor 7 towers. That's too many towers. That's a lot of towers. A center channel, CC290, a pair of mini monitors, a pair of Atom monitors, a pair of ADP390 surrounds, a Denon 4520 receiver, and an older Yamaha receiver. He figured he would use his mini monitors in his rec room, and the Atom monitors in his bedroom. He has Bluetooth. He has a Bluetooth DAC amp to power the bedroom speakers, and he could use the older Yamaha for the rec room. Mm-hmm. In his den, he has a TCL 6 Series TV. He wouldn't have a sub, but he figures a 5.0 setup using the large tower, center, and ADP surrounds, all powered by the Denon, will surely sound better than the TV's built-in speakers. And he can use a smaller pair of towers as a Zone 2 to play in his open concept living and kitchen. Anything would change about that plan? No.
Sounds really. I might swap the towers, like have the larger one in the open concept space if you just need more raw output, and use the slightly smaller towers in the den.
I kind of feel like I see what you're saying there, and I kind of agree with it, but at the same time, I think he's just wants the more bass that he can get from the larger towers in the home theater in that other room. Whereas in the main open concept thing, it's never going to be about the bass or the output. It's
more a background music thing.
Music.
I mean, the thing is, that's easy enough to swap at a later date if you just discover that that's what you want to do. But other than that, I think the plan is very sound.
When that question started, I felt like we were going to go someplace that I was going to be mad about. But I felt like this is probably the most reasonable thing I've ever heard.
Yeah.
I mean, this sounds really quite reasonable to me. He's repurposed these speakers in ways that make sense, that will actually be used, and I like it. All right, so he has a couple of Chromecast devices that he could use in his Google Home ecosystem. One can plug in the Yamaha in the rec room, so that's good to go. And the other could plug into the Den, but the Chromecast only has HDMI output, and the Denon won't play HDMI sources in Zone 2, only analog sources. The DAC amp in his bedroom also has RCA inputs, but it's hard to find the discontinued Chromecast audio devices these days, so he's stuck with HDMI outputs. So does he need to get some other Google Home device that has RCA outputs, or can he turn the HDMI output into RCA somehow? I'm sure you can. I just don't know how much it costs.
No, you definitely can. You can get an HDMI audio extractor. And since you're talking about a Chromecast that is only going to be used to feed audio in this instance, we're not worried about 18 gigabits per second HDMI pass-through or anything like that. So for $25 over at Sewell, they have their HDMI audio extractor, which is limited to 10.2 gigabits per second on the HDMI in and out. But I'm really not worried about that for a Chromecast that's just being used for audio.
Right.
$25.
Yeah, that's actually kind of reasonable. Brett has a Marantz SR6012 receiver connected to both a Vizio P-Series TV and the BenQ HT3550 projector. Both displays can accept 4K HDR, and he's using an Apple TV 4K, Sony X700 Ultra HD Blu-ray player, and a PS4 as his sources. I am desperate for water. I should have brought. My throat is like the Sahara Desert in here. He's using a 50-foot active HDMI cable from Monoprice. There were some dropouts and flickering at first, but switching the sources to output 420 instead of 444 got things working fine. But then he tried to watch a 3D Blu-ray on his BenQ. His Blu-ray player refused to recognize the BenQ as a 3D device. I don't blame it. I refuse to recognize Rob as a 3D device. He's only ever been 2 dimensions for me. Therefore, he has no third dimension.
That's right.
But when he did some troubleshooting, he discovered that if the Vizio TV was disconnected from the Marantz, the 3D started working. So what's going on here? Does he need a new HDMI cable, a splitter, new receiver, or just live with physically unplugging his TV's HDMI cable when he wants to watch 3D on the projector? This is the thing that we've run into so many times with HDMI, where you have 2 things plugged in, and it all works fine until one of the things can do a thing that the other thing can't do.
Yep.
Okay? So you have, like... Usually the thing is I have a 1080p and a 4K, and I can't get 4K to the 4K one, even if the 1080p one's turned off.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, very typical.
So this is the same thing, except that replace the 4K with 3D. The one can do 3D, the other one can't do 3D. If you unplug the one that can't do 3D, suddenly it's like, oh yeah, 3D, no problem. What have you been complaining about?
Yep.
So the easy answer and the least expensive answer is to unplug this cable for the one time a year you break down and want to remember why you hate 3D. And then you go back and plug it back in and forget about it for 364 more days. That's my solution.
Yeah, that it pretty much is. I mean, certainly the cheapest solution is to just unfortunately physically unplug the Vizio anytime you want to watch some 3D, because it's the EDID. It's the extended display information data, where the Vizio is reporting I am not a 3D display, and the BenQ is saying I am, but it has to go lowest common denominator between the two of those things. Now, if you just absolutely refuse to physically plug and unplug, you could go over to HD Fury. And in your case, since all you need to do is spoof the signal so that no matter what your source device, and I believe it would only be his Blu-ray player in this case, right? That's the only thing playing 3D. As long as it believes it is connected to a 3D display and therefore sends out the signal, this will work just fine. So all you need is their doctor HDMI device, which is $100. So that's a lot more expensive than just physically unplugging an HDMI cable, but it would let you do this.
Dude, for $100, you could probably just pay one of your kids to do it. Like, here's $100. Every time I want to plug this thing in or out, you do it.
And I would assume
$1 each time they do it. That's 100 times. 3D will be certainly more dead than already is.
I would assume that the HDMI cable going between his receiver and television is shorter than the one going from his receiver to his projector. So even if the plug physically wears out, you're replacing the shorter HDMI cable.
So Brett remembers how his speaker system sounded back in the 80s. He described them as sounding warmer and modern sound than modern sound systems. Is that just his imagination? Is it due to hearing loss? Or things just EQ differently back then? He would prefer to hear things the way he remembers them sounding back then. So what can he do to make modern speaker systems sound like the good old days? To get one of those parametric EQ things and make the smiley.
He's got a Marantz SR6012. It can use the Odyssey Editor app.
You could do that. So warmer sounding. Now, there's a whole lot wrong with trying to make things sound the way that you remember them sounding, because the go down the rabbit hole of YouTube and start watching TED Talks and other things about memory and how memory works and how accurate it is and everything else. And I mean, I think I was just watching something on Disney Plus, and it was just about how your brain works or whatever, and it was about memory, and they were testing, like, as you were watching it, and you knew they were going to do this to you. You knew they were going to ask you questions about what you were just watching, so you were trying to remember it, and you still couldn't remember it. So your memory is, and I'm sure you're the smartest man alive, and therefore I can't possibly be correct, but I am correct in saying your memory is 100% faulty, 99% faulty. So what you are remembering is probably has little to do with what you actually heard and more to do with how you felt about what you were hearing.
Sure. That said, it was very often the case with older speakers that they had a significant high frequency roll off.
Right.
That was really common back in the day. And the whole warmer sound thing, some of that might have been, were you listening to radio? Because that definitely, it was not a linear signal. If it was a radio signal, were you listening to mostly records, phono records? Those are also non-linear. So that is some of it. There was the source material could have been involved, the high frequency roll off for sure. That alone can tend to make things sound warmer when you roll off the high frequency. So that is something you could actually quite easily do in the Odyssey Editor app, is just create a target curve that has a significant high frequency roll off. And if it still doesn't sound warm enough, well, then you put in a mid-bass hump into the target frequency curve. This is something you can definitely EQ to give you basically whatever type of non-linear sound you're hoping for.
Right. And to those out there who are like, oh, what? No, you shouldn't do that. You should try to have the most. No. Once you've got your system set up and it's, doing everything it's supposed to do, and you've run Odyssey and you've got your room treated and you've got everything else, and you're like, yeah, it sounds good, but I kind of want it to sound a little bit different. That is personal preference. Sure. There's nothing wrong with that. So, just play with it and have fun with it. Do a little research. I know we said make, mid-bass this and roll off that. How much does that mean? I'm not telling you. I mean, first of all, I have no idea.
Well, it will be trial and error for that. Yeah, it will be that.
But this will be the part where you'll be able to understand what it is that you liked about those older speakers. And I mean, you may just want to get like not remastered versions of some of these old albums and see if that alone does it, because it very well might. Let's do one more at least here, maybe two, because it looks like
Hopefully
this
two.
question is
That'd be nice.
short. Andrew has his bunker home theater under construction, a sealed room beneath his garage made of 8-inch concrete and steel.
Yep.
He owns the B&W 604 S2s and 601 S2, I guess it's a Series 2 or whatever, and the plan is to expand to a full Atmos setup using his dead-end X7200 WA receiver and Emotiva amp. The only two options he gave us in his email were either to track down the matching B&W sensor and another pair of bookshelf surrounds, or sell the speakers. He has to go with all new set of Emotiva speakers. He asked, would he notice a real difference by switching to the new Emotivas? Almost certainly.
You would definitely notice a difference, would be my expectation.
Yeah.
Whether you would like it is highly questionable.
Right. So B&Ws have never claimed or even desired to be a perfectly linear speaker. They have always had a target curve. There is nothing wrong with this. I cannot stress this enough. They're, Bang & Olufsen's the same way. Bose is the same way. Yes, some of you people are cringing at those names, but they're not the only ones that are the same way.
Golden Ear is this way. Yes.
Is this way as well. And a lot of you are like, oh, Golden Ear is great. Yeah, okay. They all have a targeted curve that they're going for. And that curve isn't probably that far off from pretty linear, but it is not linear. And so what does this mean when somebody tells us that they have B&Ws, should they switch? My answer is probably not, because if you've lived with B&Ws for a really long time, you like B&Ws, in which case you're going to switch and then you're going to get mad at me. This very much harkens back to the time when people were getting mad at SVS for telling people that if they have ported subs, they should stick with ported subs. And if they have sealed subs, they should stick with sealed subs. The safe advice from my end when somebody says they have B&W speakers is to tell them to stick with B&W speakers. Okay?
Unless you've been thinking the whole time you've had them, I don't really like these speakers, I would like a change. That
you've been to a showroom and you've said, oh, I went and listened to these Kefs and they were fantastic. Oh, okay, I can work with that.
Yes.
Because that tells me that you've heard a more linear speaker and you've preferred that sound. So before I can answer this question for you, sir, you need to go listen to some speakers.
Yeah. Or bring in the ones that give you free two-way shipping, so that it's very, no worry about cost. So SVS and Aperion, they both do shipping for free, both directions. So bring in a pair, that's all you need to trial it out and say, hey, I vastly prefer the B&Ws I already have, or hey, I like these SVS Ultras a whole lot more. It's just something to give you that idea of, do you possibly prefer something else? The Emotivas, I'm like, you definitely want to audition those before you decide that these are your new speakers. If you love them, hey, I got no problem with that. But they are a significantly different design than anything you've been using with the B&Ws, and I wouldn't call them a perfectly transparent speaker. They got a little character to them. So, I mean, if you love it, great, but definitely audition it before you go buying 11 of them. That's for darn sure.
Yeah, for sure. Victor has a home theater that's fully carpeted and sound treated. I don't know what sound treated means.
Well, that mean? He's got acoustic panels.
Panels on the wall.
It is not bare walls.
He has an Illusion Vision acoustically transparent screen with 3 identical Paradigm Premier and 800F towers behind it. He's using an X4500H receiver, and all of his speakers have been set to small with 80 hertz crossovers. God love you. You're doing God's work, sir. Odyssey has been run, and he is mostly very happy with the sound, but sometimes, just sometimes, dialogue in certain movies can sound a bit tinny or irritating. He knows it particularly with Jaws on Ultra HD Blu-ray. Yeah, that could be a mixed thing too, but let's go on. Should he get a mini DSP and manually EQ his center channel, or do we recommend some other fix? And as an aside, he falls on my side about surround back debate. Now that he's upgraded from 5.1 to 7.1, he says he rarely notices the backs, and he should have just stuck with 5.1. Yeah, this man's smart.
But we had someone above who was doing everything he could to keep his surround backs. So different tastes for different folks.
Some people are wrong, and some people are like me and Victor. Ouch. Okay, so I'm going to be a tiny bit honest with you. I'm not super surprised to hear somebody give a little bit of a complaint about Paradigm, in that they can tend to be a little bit on the tinny side at the very, very top end from time to time. I've heard Paradigms before. I've liked Paradigms before. I would not be surprised that somebody is saying what you've said.
Mm.
This is, again, I mean, you have X4500H receiver. There is nothing that says that you can't, and it might just be going to the other audit instead from flat to reference might do it for you. Here, rolling off the top end just a tiny bit.
And if that doesn't, you've got the editor app as an option.
Yeah. Yeah, and then exactly. Then the next step would be to do that. I don't think you need a mini DSP.
No,
I mean, first of all, you'll have to buy it. You'll have to buy an amp to go between it
right.
and your speaker. So there's another expenditure on top of that. But with the Odyssey editor app, and just changing the Odyssey to reference, I think that should be enough to tame this high end.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. No, you certainly don't need an outboard device like the mini DSP. You can definitely do this with the Odyssey editor app if it even comes to that. I would say we don't know exactly how he did the microphone positioning when he did his Odyssey setup. It is sometimes the case where if you have the microphone position too close to the back of your seat, or some people put it right in the seat or on the top of their headrest or something like that, not a full 1 foot radius bubble of air around the microphone, which is what we're hoping for, because that isn't made clear in the manual. I don't blame anybody who's like, hey, I put it in my seat like it said to, and this was what came out. So it could just be a matter of if you were to remeasure with what we recommend as better microphone placement of the Odyssey mic, that it wouldn't boost the treble, or it might roll off the treble a little bit more than it has done in your current Odyssey measurement. So it could be as simple as that. If it isn't, the Odyssey editor app will allow you to roll off those highs a little bit.
Right. That's a really good point. Improper mic placement can cause all sorts of weirdness to happen in your room as Odyssey tries to overcome the fact that you've put an obstruction between the speakers, particular speakers, and your mic,
or just a reflective surface in very close proximity to the mic.
Right. So making sure that you've got your mic set up is also a very good thing, and rerunning Odyssey would not be a bad thing. If you're really noticing it, over and over again, I mean, it might be something else.
It could just be the particular mix. I mean, Jaws is an older movie at this point.
That's right. It is an older movie, and if you're only noticing it with that one disc, then I might just chalk it up to that and say, that's just the way this thing sounds. Because that can happen as well.
Yeah.
I mean, how long did I mess with my sound settings in Thor Ragnarok on the Ultra HD Blu-ray before I just gave up and said, I guess it's got no bass.
And there are plenty of music albums that are really badly mastered, and if you have a really nice accurate speaker system, it reveals that. So if all you want is everything to sound pleasing, maybe you don't want the most accurate sound system, because it will reveal to you when something was just recorded and mastered poorly.
Yeah. All right. So who do we have left?
Alrighty, we have Alex Y returning to his townhouse setup. Gurinder. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce this gentleman's name, but I think it's Timoteus. I think that's right.
Oh, I can't wait till I mess it up next week. I'm looking forward to that.
Daniel W, David B, with some large pictures I should have shrunk, Ben F, and Terry G. That's who's on our list. Right. Plus whoever came in on Monday.
Seems like a lot considering how far down this list we were. So maybe those questions are short. All right, I want to thank our 121 patrons over at patreon.com. Patreon's a service where you can sign up for a monthly contribution to our podcast. So we want to thank all 121 of you. Thank you very much.
For sure. That's patreon.com/AVRant Podcast. If you would like to sign up, you can think of it as a voluntary subscription. Thanks so much to our 121 patrons over there. And for anybody who doesn't want to sign up for Patreon, but would like to give a one-time donation, we do have a PayPal account. Please come to our website, avrant.com, and over on the right-hand side, it says Support AVRant, and there's a picture of a cup of coffee, which will take you to PayPal.
All right. We want to thank Gurinder for sending Rob a gift card.
Yes, Gurinder, thank you very much. It was much appreciated.
Thank Victor for talking us up to everybody, I guess. All the people.
Whenever Victor buys something, he tells them that AVRant sent him their way, even though that might not be entirely true, but hey, we appreciate it, Victor.
We also want to thank Neil and David for talking us up to SVS.
For sure. Neil and David, thank you very much. Congrats on the purchases from SVS as well.
And for those notes of gratitude from our listeners who are happy that we're still doing 2 hours a week.
We are.
Greg, Kevin, Dan, and Carl, you are welcome.
Yes, indeed, Greg, Kevin, Dan, Carl. Thank you. We appreciate the notes of encouragement. It does help pick our spirits up and helps us feel good about keeping this podcast going. So thank you.
For AV Rant, I'm Tom Andry.
And I'm Rob H. Now stay in and listen to something.